stunning long-legged nemesis, the ultimate ice queen, has suddenly undergone a complete personality transplant. She's dead set on visiting me in the middle of the night now that I have amnesia, all because I got into a minor fender bender. Even though the doctor said, "I'm perfectly fine," I had a sudden stroke of genius and decided to fake amnesia just to mess with her a little. Plus, it's the perfect way to dodge the corporate marriage my family is forcing on me. But I never expected this. My rival of 20 years, the woman I've been at war with since childhood. The icy CEO of Lu Global, Sarafina Lu, was actually the first one to burst into my hospital room. With bloodshot eyes, she grabbed my hand, then pulled me into a tight embrace, sobbing, "Darling, you're finally awake." Watching her incredibly heartfelt performance, she was practically radiating maternal warmth and devotion. I get it. This woman wants to take advantage of my brain damage, doesn't she? She wants to swindle me out of my family fortune. Fine, I'll play along. But when she started spoon-feeding me and wiping my mouth and even started cuddling me to sleep, I realized things were starting to go south. The way this woman looks at me, why is she starting to look like a hungry wolf? She's found a prime piece of meat. Wait, it looks like she isn't just after my money, she's after my body too. Back when my head slammed into the steering wheel, I had only one thought. I'm screwed, is my multi-million-dollar face. The face that's only slightly less handsome than the guys reading this story. Going to be permanently disfigured. When I finally opened my eyes again, it was late at night. The scent of the hospital filled my nose. Familiar mix of disinfectant and the smell of old money. I'm Chase Jiang, the Crown Prince of Jiang Enterprises. Essentially, I'm a world-class playboy. I'd been in a car accident. My attending physician was a guy with a major receding hairline. He was holding my brain CT scans, looking dead serious as he spoke to my useless uncle, Arthur Jiang. The patient's physical condition is fine. However, due to the impact on the brain, he might experience temporary amnesia. On Arthur's face, which had the word ambition thickly etched into it, a look of deep concern instantly appeared. "Chase, my boy, do you still recognize your uncle?" I looked at him and blinked. My gaze was clear, innocent, and totally blank. Goo gaga. Looked like a fresh-faced college grad who hadn't been hit by reality yet. Then I slowly shook my head. The corner of Arthur's mouth curled into an almost imperceptible smirk. The fish had taken the bait. That's right, I didn't actually lose my memory. The doctor said, "Might, not definitely." Just moments ago, while I was closing my eyes and playing dead, I clearly heard my dear uncle on the phone with that woman, Bianca White. "Bianca, don't worry. The doctor says he might have amnesia. When he wakes up, I'll tell him you're his fiancée. If we lock in the engagement, the Jiang inheritance will be as good as ours." Wow. I mean, seriously, just wow. My parents just left for a business trip. Their bodies aren't even cold yet. Wait, scratch that. Their plane barely even took off, and he's already itching to sell me out, just so he can swallow the company whole. Since you want to play, Uncle, I'll play with you. Faking amnesia, easy. I'm a man who once audited acting classes at the National Academy. After all, as I was preparing to continue my role as a pure, innocent youth, bewildered by the world, the hospital door slammed open with a loud bang. A woman stormed in like a whirlwind. A gust of expensive perfume hit me as her high heels clicked against the floor like war drums. The newcomer was wearing a sharp, crisp white suit. Her long hair was swept up, revealing a slender swan-like neck. Her makeup was flawless. Her gaze was icy. She radiated a step aside. "Or I'll crush you, Aura." It was none other than Sarafina Lu, the CEO of Lu Global. She's also the girl I grew up with. Same preschool, same elementary, same middle school. We used to let the air out of each other's bike tires, caterpillars into each other's backpacks, and spent 20 years in a state of constant total war. There was zero love loss between us. So, what was she doing here? I froze for a second, and 18 different possibilities flashed through my mind. Was she here to laugh at me? Or was she here to confirm if I was dead or not? Maybe she wanted to wait until I was buried so she could burn some joss paper and celebrate with a party. But what happened next completely fried my brain's CPU. Legendary Ice Queen CEO saw me, and in that instant her frozen mask, the one she'd worn for years, completely melted away. Her eyes turned red instantly, looking as if she'd just suffered the world's greatest injustice. She rushed to my bedside in 3 quick strides, and right under Arthur's dumbfounded gaze, she snatched up my hand. Her hand was cold, but her voice was trembling and tearful, soft, sweet, and incredibly delicate. "Darling, you're finally awake. You scared me to death." The air in the entire hospital room froze for 3 solid seconds. The moment she said, "Darling," I looked into her beautiful almond-shaped eyes, which were quickly filling with tears that threatened to spill over. With that pitiful, tragic expression on her face, acting was so top tier. She could have signed up for an Oscar right then and there. In a flash, I realized what was happening. Oh, I see. Wow, okay. My dear uncle wants to set me up with a fake fiancé. My dear rival decided to cut straight to the chase and crown herself as my official girlfriend. We're both clever foxes here. Who are you trying to fool with this ghost story? Looking at her performance, clear, Sarafina had also zeroed in on my amnesia as the perfect golden opportunity. She didn't just want a piece of the pie, she wanted to take the whole damn cake. I sneered inwardly, but on the outside, I kept up my mask of pure confused innocence. I shook my head and looked at her, my eyes filled with the curiosity and timidity of a total stranger. Miss, who are you? Do we know each other? That soft, timid miss made Sarafina's entire body stiffen. Her tragic, grief-stricken expression almost cracked. I caught it, a flash of both disgust and pure ecstasy in her eyes. She quickly adjusted her face and said in an even more heartbroken tone, "Chase, it's me, Sarafina. I'm your girlfriend. Do you really not remember me? We were so in love." As she spoke, she even managed to squeeze out 2 crystalline tears which rolled down her cheeks at the perfect moment. I watched her, feeling absolutely nothing inside. I actually kind of wanted to give her a round of applause. She really is the woman who's been fighting me for 20 years. Her professional skills are terrifyingly good. Arthur was standing off to the side, completely stunned. He pointed at Sarafina, then at me, his mouth hanging open for a long time before he sputtered. Nonsense. When did my nephew ever have a girlfriend? How come I didn't know about this? Sarafina immediately turned her full firepower on him. She turned to look at Arthur, her eyes returning to that sharp, icy coldness. "Uncle Arthur, this is a private matter between Chase and me. Do I need to report my dating life to you? Or are you trying to take advantage of Chase's amnesia to do something to him?" With those words, she completely shut down anything Arthur was going to say next. Arthur's face turned a mottled shade of blue and white. He pointed at Sarafina, stammering, you, for ages, but he couldn't get a single coherent word out. Finally, he just threw his hands up in a rage. "This is preposterous." After saying that, he glared at me, as if asking why I wasn't being more useful, and then stormed out of the room. Only I was left in the ward, along with my brand new girlfriend. The room fell silent once again. Sarafina looked at me, and the grief on her face vanished without a trace. It was replaced by a cold, calculating gaze, as if she were evaluating a piece of merchandise she'd just acquired. I looked back at her, maintaining my harmless, wide-eyed stare. "Come on, then. Let's hurt each other. Let's see who breaks first." Probably convinced I'd gone completely brain dead, so once again she plastered on a tender, sickly sweet smile that could make your skin crawl. Using a tone like she was coddling a toddler, she whispered softly, "My dear Chase, don't be afraid. I'll be here with you from now on, and I'll take care of everything." I nodded like a little chick pecking a grain. Then I reached out my hand and pointed at the sliced apple on the nightstand. "Miss, I'm hungry." The smile on Sarafina Lou's face froze. I saw her eyebrows twitch slightly, clearly waiting on someone's hand, and foot was nowhere near her professional wheelhouse, but she still picked up a slice of apple and handed it to me. I didn't take it. I just opened my mouth and let out an "Ah, Sarafina Lou." Her expression looked exactly like she had just swallowed a fly. That look of wanting to snap but having to hold it in was pure constipation. It was absolutely magnificent. In my mind, I was already rolling on the floor laughing. My face remained locked in that look of wide-eyed innocence. "Miss, feed me." Sarafina took a deep breath. I could practically hear her grinding her back teeth together. In the end, she resigned herself to her fate and brought the slice of apple to my lips. Fixing a practiced professional smile, she said, "Good boy, open up." I took a bite. Sweet. It was incredibly sweet. The news of Sarafina Lou's meticulous care for me quickly spread throughout the entire high society circle. Everyone was stunned. The crown prince of the Jiang family and the she-devil of the Liu family. These two were fundamentally incompatible. The fact that these arch-rivals were actually a couple was insane, and that they were head over heels in love. Chase Jiang gets into a car accident and loses his memory, and Sarafina Liu stays by his side through thick and thin. What kind of fairy tale romance was this? My best friend and ultimate wingman, Luke Vance, was the first to charge into the hospital. He was carrying a basket of fruit as he burst into the room like a whirlwind. The moment he saw the scene before him, he literally turned into a stone statue. I was currently leaning back against the headboard, enjoying an orange peeled personally by the hands of CEO Liu. Serafina was holding a slice of orange, a perfect smile plastered on her face. As she said gently, "Open wide," I opened my mouth and ate it. Then, in a voice so sweet it was nauseating, I said, "Thank you, Miss Sarafina." The fruit basket in Luke's hand hit the floor with a loud thud. Apples and bananas rolled all over the place. His jaw dropped so low you could have fit an egg in his mouth. His eyes were bulging like copper bells, with a look of pure seismic shock in his pupils. Holy! He pointed at Serafina, then at me, his expression screaming that his worldview had just collapsed. Chase, you her, what the hell is this? Seeing Luke, Serafina stood up gracefully, wiped her hands with a tissue, immediately reassumed her persona as the icy CEO. Mr. Vance, please keep your voice down. Chase needs his rest. Luke ignored her completely. He lunged to my bedside in a single stride and grabbed my shoulders, shaking me violently. Chase, wake up. Did someone put a hex on you? This is Serafina. Lou, the woman who used to steal your lollipops, tear up your homework, and draw turtles on your bicycle. The one you had a contest with to see who could pee further, and you lost miserably. He shook me until I was dizzy and cross-eyed. I could only look at him with a face full of confusion. Who are you? I don't know you. Luke's movements came to a screeching halt. He looked into my clear, blank, and rather stupid gaze, and he was completely dumbfounded. No way. Chase, did you actually lose your memory? I gave a slow nod. Luke let out a mournful wail and flopped onto the floor. He clutched his head in both hands, looking like the sky was falling. It's over. It's all over. My boy Chase has gone soft in the head. Now he's being played by the Sheevil. Can't you see? The look in her eyes is just go, Gaga fake. Serafina let out a cold snort from the side, looking down at him with disdain. Luke Vance, you can eat whatever you want, but you'd better watch your mouth. Chase and I are truly in love. Please respect our relationship. Truly in love. Luke acted like he just heard the joke of the century. He literally bounced up from the floor. If you two are truly in love, I'll go streaking through the streets tomorrow. Serafina's eyebrow arched as she prepared to retort, but right then I timidly tugged on the hem of her jacket. Miss Serafina, who is he? He's so scary. I'm frightened. I hid behind Serafina as I spoke, acting exactly like a startled little rabbit. Serafina glanced down at me, her eyes showing a complex mix of emotions. For a split second, I felt that icy aura of hers melt just a tiny bit. She reached out and actually patted me gently on the back, though the movement was a bit stiff. You're definitely meant to be comforting. Don't be afraid. His name is Luke Vance. He's your best friend. Then she looked up and glared at Luke with an unfriendly gaze. See that? You're scaring him. Luke's expression looked even worse than if he'd just eaten something gross. I stayed hidden behind Serafina, peeking half my head out to look at Luke with my most innocent eyes. Then I spoke up. A friend? I pointed at Luke, then pointed back at myself. Before turning to Serafina, I asked with a face full of curiosity. Miss Serafina, if he's my best friend, then he must know everything about our past, right? Serafina's body visibly stiffened for a moment. Luke froze as well. I continued my performance, my eyes sparkling with a thirst for knowledge. I remember you telling me that the first time we met was on a rainy day. You didn't have an umbrella, so I gave you mine and ran home in the pouring rain. Right. It was the romantic meeting story Serafina had made up for me the day before. It was full of holes, and so cringeworthy I could have burrowed a hole into the floor with my toes. Serafina bit the bullet and nodded. Right, exactly. That's how it happened. I immediately turned to Luke and asked with an expectant face. You're Luke, right? Were you there at the time? I remember you laughed at me for being stupid, saying I was risking my life just to chase a girl. Luke's brain had clearly short-circuited. His mouth hung open as he looked at me, and then at Serafina, his eyes full of the confusion of, who am I? Where am I? What the hell are you talking about? Serafina, standing to the side, shot Luke, a subtle warning look. The meaning in that gaze was crystal clear. If you dare blow my cover, you're dead. Luke was a smart guy. He was a playboy, but he wasn't an idiot. He looked at my innocent face and Serafina's murderous eyes, and he instantly realized something was up, and it was definitely something big. My bro was definitely being set up. He took a deep breath, forcing a smile onto his face that looked more like he was crying. Ah, right. That's exactly what happened. It was right there. I even took photos of you two. Gosh, look at my memory. I nodded with satisfaction. He was a quick learner. Then I threw out my next question. And I also remember Miss Serafina saying that to woo her, I stood under her dorm building and played the guitar, singing love songs all night long. And in the end, was chased away by the security guard with a stick. Weren't you acting as my lookout back then? The smile on Luke's face froze completely. Cold sweat started beads on his forehead. Playing guitar and singing love songs. Chased John, the guy who couldn't carry a tune if his life depended on it. Chased away by a security guard. This was more far-fetched than a horror movie. Serafina, standing nearby, had already begun to slice him up with her eyes. Luke's survival instinct went into overdrive. Wrapped his thigh hard. Right, exactly. That's it. I was right there next to you holding the spotlight. It was so moving, so heart-wrenching. It was world-shaking. Even the security guard was moved to tears by you. He said he only wanted to invite you in for a cup of tea. He looked like he wanted to gag just saying it. I watched the two of them, one digging a hole like a maniac, and the other filling it back up with tears in her eyes. I almost burst out laughing. No, I had to spice things up a bit more. I grabbed Serafina's hand with a look of deep gratitude. I looked at her with pure affection. Serafina, you're so good to me. I can't believe you're willing to revisit such embarrassing memories, just for my sake. Serafina's face went from white to red, and then to a lovely shade of green. I pressed on. I turned to Luke and said, Luke, thank you. Once I'm better, I'll definitely take a bullet for you too. Luke waved his hands frantically. No, bro. Please don't. Focus on getting better. The company, your girlfriend, is more important. The way he looked at Serafina was full of pure awe and pity. It was as if he was saying, Godspeed, brother. Take care. After a soul-crushed Luke finally left, it was just the two of us in the room again. Serafina let out a long, weary sigh. Her whole body finally relaxed. She rubbed her stiff face. I looked at her and suddenly said, Serafina, I think I just remembered something. She instantly snapped to attention. Did you remember? I said with a serious face. I think I remember that I have a bank card. The pin is your birthday, and I think there's a lot of money in it. Serafina's eyes lit up instantly. They were as bright as a 1,000-watt bulb. Serafina's efficiency was nothing short of terrifying after I recalled the bank card with her birthday as the password. It only took her half a day to use the excuse of safeguarding my assets to get all my cards and IDs for my still fuming uncle. She basically snatched them right out of his hands. Of course, the process was full of elite business, corporate jargon, verbal sparring, and intense power playing. But I didn't care. I only cared about the result. The result was Serafina sitting by my bed with a stack of my cards, trying them out one by one. The pen she used for every single one, her birthday. I watched her focused, expectant expression. She looked like a child about to open a mystery box. I marvelled again at how far this woman was willing to go for money. She tried the first card. Incorrect pin. She frowned. It's fine. Next one. Incorrect pin. Her frown deepened. Incorrect pin. Incorrect pin. Incorrect pin. When the final card also showed incorrect pin, Serafina's face was as dark as the bottom of a burnt pot. She looked up at me. That look, it was like she was looking at a defective product that broke right out of the box. I immediately pulled my head back, looking innocent and hurt. What's wrong, Serafina? Serafina, did I remember it wrong? Serafina took a deep breath and squeezed a few words to her teeth. It's fine. You probably just remembered the wrong card. She shoved the pile of useless cards back into her bag with a bit of violence. I looked at her and spoke cautiously. Are you angry, Serafina? No, she answered quickly, but her tone was harsh. You are angry, I pouted, my eyes turning red on command. Is it because you think I'm a useless idiot? Because I can't even remember a pin? Is that why you don't love me anymore? Serafina stared at me, seeing me on the verge of tears. The vein in her temple was throbbing. I knew she probably wanted to strangle me right now, but she couldn't. Her persona was that of a devoted, loyal girlfriend. If she dared to lose her temper with me, all her hard work acting up to this point would be for nothing. So she had to take another deep breath and force a smile that looked more painful than crying. How could you say that? I love you more than anything in the world. It's okay if you can't remember. How about you let me manage all your money from now on? Okay, there it was. The fox's tail was finally showing. I sneered internally, but on the outside, I broke into a smile through my tears. I nodded vigorously. Okay, I'll let you handle all my money. Everything I have is yours. A genuine sliver of a smile finally appeared on Serafina's face. To pacify her amnesiac idiot boyfriend and to secure her future meal ticket, she decided to discharge me from the hospital and take me back to her apartment to live with her. She called it, making it easier to take care of me. Naturally, I was all for it. Isn't this just the lamb walking into the lion's den? Or rather, the wolf walking into the lamb's den. Serafina's apartment was a top-tier penthouse in the city centre. Decor matched her personality perfectly. Minimalist and cold, black, white and grey. Not a single unnecessary splash of colour. It was so clean, it looked like a showroom. She settled me into the guest room, tossed a pair of pyjamas at me, and went off to handle her work. After I showered and changed, I felt a bit bored, so I padded along barefoot and wandered over to her study door. The door wasn't fully closed. There was a small crack. I saw Serafina sitting at her desk, wearing blue light glasses, completely focused on her computer screen. The screen was covered in dense data and stock charts. This was her true self, focused, calm, like a queen commanding a battlefield. It was a much better look than when she was putting on an act in front of me. I was watching her, entranced. The phone on her desk rang. She picked it up and put it on speaker. It was the voice of her best friend on the other end, sounding loud and rowdy. "Sarah, did you really bring that idiot Chase home with you? Are you crazy? What do you even see in him? The fact that he's a vegetable or that he calls you." Mrs. Sarafina picked up her coffee and took a sip. Her tone was flat. "I'm in it for his family's company shares. My God, you really are planning a financial scam, aren't you? Be careful. Second uncle of his, Arthur Jiang, is no walk in the park, and if Chase ever gets his memory back, he'll probably skin you alive." Sarafina let out a cold laugh. "Get his memory back with his IQ. Even if he remembers, it won't be much higher than it is now. Don't worry. I know what I'm doing. Once I get him to sign the stock transfer agreement, I'll ship him right back to the Jiang family, and then we'll be even." "Well, you'd better hurry up then. By the way, isn't it exhausting taking care of an idiot?" "Exhausting?" Sarafina paused. She seemed to think of something, and a hint of disgust entered her voice. "It's more than just exhausting. He's basically a giant infant right now. I have to feed him, hold his hand when he walks. He's like a total. I have to buy him snacks just to keep him occupied. I rub my nose outside the door. Who are you calling?" The best friend on the other end was still egging her on. "Well, you'd better keep a close eye on him. Don't let him crawl into your bed in the middle of the night. He might be an idiot, but he's seriously hot. That body. Wow, I saw him at that gala last time. He's basically a walking hormone. The two of you living together is like a match near a powder keg. Don't get high on your own supply and end up devouring him yourself." "Shut up," Sarafina cursed. I could hear the flustered annoyance in her tone. "Do you think I'm like you, with nothing but filth in my brain? I have zero interest in him." Sure, zero interest. You're only interested in money." The best friend burst into a fit of giggles. Sarafina didn't want to waste any more breath on her. She hung up the phone immediately. Silence returned to the study. Standing outside the door, I felt like the timing was just about right. I worked up the necessary emotions, then pushed the door open and walked in. Her footsteps were very light, like a cat's. Sarafina clearly hadn't noticed me yet. She was taking off her glasses and rubbing her tired brow. I walked up behind her and gave her a gentle hug from the back. Sarafina's body instantly went as rigid as a stone. I could feel all her muscles tensing up like a cat that had been startled with every hair on its body standing on end. I rested my chin on her shoulder, leaning close to her ear, and used my most innocent, most dependent tone to blow a soft breath. "Miss Sarafina," scared of sleeping alone. In that instant, I felt Sarafina's body become even more rigid than an ice sculpture. She was completely paralyzed, and her breathing had come to a halt. I could even clearly feel the delicate skin at the base of her ear, turning red at a visible speed. It went from pink to a deep crimson until it was so red it looked like it might bleed. "Haha, can't keep up the act anymore, can you? Ice Queen CEO." The little version of me in my head was already cheering and celebrating. I pressed on, quickly nuzzling her cheek with my head. "Miss, you smell so good." Sarafina acted as if she'd been hit by an electric shock and suddenly snapped out of it. She scrambled with all her might to push me off her, then practically bounced out of her chair. She put a safe distance of 3 meters between us. Her face was as red as a cooked shrimp, and her eyes were filled with shock and embarrassment, along with a trace of panic I couldn't quite place. "Jace, what are you doing?" Her voice was sharp and thin, completely lacking its usual composure. I stood where I was and looked at her, my eyes instantly welling up with tears. I pouted miserably, and my voice took on a sobbing quality. "I'm just scared. The doctor said, my brain is broken. I'm afraid if I fall asleep, I won't wake up again." As I spoke, the golden bean started to drop. This was my specialty back in the day. It was this very trick that got my dad to buy me my first sports car. Sarafina looked at me, looked at my incredibly handsome face, with 2 lines of tears. She stared at me at those clear eyes full of terror and helplessness. Her mouth opened as if to say something, but no words came out. The expression on her face alternated between, "You pervert and he's just a simpleton." In the end, a better nature lost the fight. She ran her fingers through her hair in frustration, completely messing up her perfectly styled look. Fine. Stop crying," she barked, but there was no real bite to it. I cried even harder. "You're yelling at me. You really don't love me." She closed her eyes and took a deep breath, looking like she was about to march to her execution. "I wasn't yelling at you. Don't be scared. I'll stay with you." I stopped my tears instantly and looked at her with sparkling eyes. "Really? Is Miss Sarafina going to sleep with me? I'll sleep in the guest room. You sleep in the master suite." She practically ground those words out through her teeth. The master suite? Wasn't that her room? I saw her fair neck had already turned completely red. "We're getting somewhere. I shook my head like a stubborn child. No, I want to be with you, otherwise I'll still be scared. I reached out and grabbed the hem of her shirt, giving it a gentle tug. Please, Miss Sarafina. I used the most sincere look I'd ever mastered in my life. Sarafina looked at my face, then at my watery eyes. She was locked in an internal battle. I knew that in her head there must be two little versions of her fighting. The devil was saying, strangle this brat who keeps pushing his luck, while the angel was saying, endure it for the shares. He's just a child. Eventually, reason, or rather the desire for money, triumphed over impulse. She let out a sigh of resignation. Fine. You have to sleep on the floor. Okay. I agreed immediately before she could change her mind, and so that night I successfully made it into Sarafina's bedroom and set up a sleeping mat on the floor. Her bedroom was massive, also decorated in shades of black, white, grey, but the air was filled with a faint, lovely scent. It was the scent of her. I lay on the floor mat with the blanket pulled up, showing only my head. Sarafina was wearing conservative grey long-sleeved pyjamas, wrapping herself up tightly. She lay on the far side of the massive bed, as far from me as possible with her back to me. Her body was as stiff as a board. Chase, are you asleep? She suddenly asked. Not yet, I answered honestly. Then you aren't allowed to move around. You aren't allowed to get on the bed. Do you hear me? She warned fiercely. I agreed obediently. After a while, she asked again, Are you cold? No. After another while, can you really not remember anything? I rolled over and looked at her tense back. Yeah. My head is empty. Everything is clean. There's nothing left inside. It feels like the old me died. My voice was soft, carrying a perfect touch of confusion and fragility. In the darkness, I saw Sarafina's body seem to relax just a little. She remained silent for a long time. Just when I thought she had fallen asleep, she suddenly spoke. Her voice was very low. That might not be such a bad thing. Huh? I asked, puzzled. She didn't explain further, only saying, go to sleep. I slept very well that night. Sarafina seemed to have stayed up the whole time. When I woke up the next morning, I saw 2 huge dark circles under her eyes, and she looked haggarded. I was over the moon, but my face showed only concern. Miss Sarafina, did you not sleep well? Was I snoring? Sarafina shot me a glare. The resentment in that look was almost overflowing. She didn't say a word and went straight into the bathroom. I hummed a tune, brushing my teeth and washing my face in a great mood. By the time I'd gotten ready and walked out of the room, Sarafina had already changed. She was about to head out. She was wearing a black dress today with a beige trench coat over it. She still had that queen aura, but when she saw me, she immediately put on that gentle expression again. She handed me a document and an ink pad. Chase, come here and put your thumbprint right here. I took it and had a look. Stock transfer agreement. Wow, she wasn't even pretending anymore. She was serving up the main course directly. I blinked, looking at the words on the agreement with a face full of curiosity. Miss, what's written on here? There are so many words I don't understand, Sarafina explained patiently. This is a little game. If you put a thumbprint here, I'll buy you some candy. Buying candy? Are you treating me like a 3-year-old? I rolled my eyes internally, but my face kept that same innocent expression. I picked up the ink pad and got some red on my finger, then held up the agreement. In Sarafina's eyes, there was a glint of what could only be described as hunger. She thought I was about to press it down. Instead, I held the agreement up, looking it over from every angle. Miss, this paper is so white. Can I use it to draw a picture? Sarafina's smile froze. No, you can't. I looked down at the agreement in my hand, then glanced at the glass of water on the table nearby. Then, under Sarafina Lou's horrified gaze, I took that priceless stock transfer agreement and very carefully folded it into a paper airplane. Miss, look, I know how to make an airplane. I held up the paper airplane, showing it off with a face full of pride. Sarafina's face was already starting to turn green, but I wasn't done. I ran to the balcony with the paper airplane, breathed a puff of air onto its nose for luck. Fly, fly away with my dreams. Then I let it go. That paper airplane, carrying all of Sarafina's hopes and dreams, traced a graceful arc through the air before nose-sieving straight into the fountain below. It was instantly soaked and sank to the bottom. The entire world went silent. I turned around to see Sarafina standing behind me. Her fists were clenched so hard they were cracking. Her chest was heaving violently, and her eyes were burning with 2 raging fires of fury. If looks could kill, it would have been turned to ash right then and there. I looked at her and took a step back, saying timidly, Miss, please don't be mad. I'll fold another one for you later. Sarafina slowly forced a smile at me. It was a smile more terrifying than a demon's. Chase Jen, Digger, you're amazing. She said in the end, Sarafina didn't actually hit me. After all, it wouldn't be cost-effective to break her future ATM. But from that day on, the way she looked at me became exceptionally complex. She was looking at a bomb that could go off at any moment. She stopped pressuring me to sign documents. Instead, she switched to a soft power strategy. Simply put, she wanted to raise me to be a complete and utter invalid, a giant infant who couldn't survive a day without her. And so my life of luxury began. In the morning, Sarafina would personally squeeze the toothpaste for me. At meals, she would peel the shrimp and debone the fish before placing them at my lips. When we went out, Sarafina would hold my hand tightly as if she were walking a Siberian husky, terrified I might wander off. Naturally, I enjoyed every second of it. After all, having the multi-billionaire CEO of Lu Global acting as my personal nanny was an experience very few people would ever have. One day, Luke Vance showed up again. When he arrived, I was sitting on the sofa with my mouth wide open, waiting for Sarafina to feed me sliced strawberries. Luke saw the scene the second he walked in, and his foot slipped, nearly making him eat dirt. He leaned against the wall, looking at me with a pained expression. "Chase, you've fallen so far. You're not the hard-boiled man I used to know anymore." Chewed on a strawberry and mumbled, "Luke, you're here." Sarafina spared him a glance, her expression flat, but her eyes were full of warning. Luke was clearly traumatized by Sarafina at this point. He didn't dare challenge her head-on. He leaned in close and whispered, "Chase, your uncle is making some big moves lately. He's teamed up with a few veteran shareholders to call a board meeting. He wants to use your mental instability as an excuse to strip you of your inheritance rights." I nodded, indicating I understood. This was all exactly as I'd expected. Luke was as frantic as an ant on a hot griddle. "How can you be GM? If you keep playing dumb like this, they're going to steal the company right out from under you." Before I could speak, Sarafina, standing nearby, spoke up coldly. "You don't need to worry about company business. As long as I'm here, no one touches what belongs to Chase." Her tone was calm, but it carried an unquestionable authority. Luke froze, and so did I. I looked up at Sarafina. She had her eyes downcast, using a tissue to gently wipe the strawberry juice from the corner of my mouth. Her movements were natural and practiced. The sunlight streamed in through the floor to ceiling windows, shrouding her in a golden glow. In that moment, it actually felt a little flutter in my heart. Wait, Chase, get a grip. This woman is a con artist. She's only after your money." Luke clearly felt the surrealness of the situation as well. He stared blankly at Sarafina, then at me. His mouth hung open for a long time before he finally sputtered out, "Sister-in-law, you're the boss." Sarafina's hand paused, and the tissue nearly poked me in the nostril. Her ears turned red again. After Luke left, Sarafina took a phone call. It seemed to be an invitation to a very important gala. After hanging up, she looked at me, her eyes full of hesitation. Clearly, she wanted to go to the event, but she didn't feel right leaving a giant infant like me home alone. I immediately spoke up with understanding. "Miss, are you going to a party? Can I come too, please? I promise I'll be good and won't wander off." Sarafina hesitated, bringing a simpleton like me to a high society. Gala was like carrying a ticking time bomb around, but seeing the expectant look in my eyes, she couldn't bring herself to say no. In the end, she agreed. The night of the gala, Kafina picked out a sharp white suit for me. She, on the other hand, wore a burgundy backless gown. She was breathtaking, like a red rose in full bloom when she stepped out of her room. I have to admit, I was stunned. If this woman hadn't gone into business, she'd definitely be an A-list star. "Do I look okay?" She stood in front of me, fidgeting slightly with the hem of her dress as she asked with forced nonchalance. I nodded vigorously, my eyes sparkling. "Miss, you're the most beautiful person in the whole world." The corners of Sarafina's mouth curled up uncontrollably, but she quickly regained her serious expression and warned me. "Listen, Chase, once we get to the ballroom, you must stay close to me at all times. Talk to strangers, and don't eat anything random." "Did you hear me?" "I hear you," I answered excitedly, like a grade schooler, about to head out on a field trip. When we entered the ballroom, Sarafina immediately became the centre of attention, and by her side, clinging to her like a little accessory. I naturally drew everyone's gaze as well. Everyone looked at us, their eyes filled with gossip and curiosity. "Isn't that CEO's Luwu? Who's the handsome guy with her?" "You don't know? That's the Jiang family heir, Chase Jiang. Heard he lost his memory and went soft in the head. My God, CEO Lu is actually taking care of him. Aren't those two arch enemies? What do you know? They say there's a thin line between love and hate. Look at how gently CEO Lu is looking at him." Listen to the whispers around us, feeling triumphant inside. Sarafina, however, was clearly uncomfortable. She gripped my hand a little tighter. Just then, a discordant voice rang out. "Oh, if it isn't CEO Lu, what a rare guest." I looked up and saw a slick-haired man in a flashy suit, holding a wine glass, walking toward us with a malicious smirk. It was the city's most notorious playboy, Leo Miller, the heir to the Miller family. This jerk had tried to hit on Sarafina before, but after being rejected, he'd held a grudge ever since, never missing a chance to talk trash behind her back. Leo Miller walked up to us, his gaze sweeping over me with pure contempt. So, this is the legendary Chase, who's lost his mind. Wow, he certainly looks innocent. Sarafina's expression went cold. Mr. Miller, I suggest you watch your tone. Leo Miller burst out laughing. It was a loud, booming sound meant specifically for everyone nearby to hear. CEO Lou, this is getting old. We all know what's really going on here. You're passing up so many talented young men just to settle for a simpleton. Why do you think an idiot is easier to control? His words were incredibly nasty. The people around us began to whisper and point. Sarafina's face went white instantly. She was trembling with rage, gripping my hands so hard that her nails were almost sinking into my skin. I knew her pride, being humiliated like this, in front of so many people. She looked like she was about to explode. I looked at her reamed eyes and bitten lip, and my desire to watch the drama suddenly vanished. It was replaced by an indescribable irritation. Even if she's just a fake girlfriend to chase Jang, she isn't someone a piece of trash like you gets to bully. I broke free from Sarafina's hand, stepped forward and blocked her path. Everyone was stunned. Sarafina was stunned too. She tugged on the hem of my jacket. "Chase!" she whispered. "Don't be impulsive. Let's go." I ignored her. I just looked up at Leo, who was half a head taller than me, wearing that look of pure innocence. Then I did something that shocked the whole room. I reached out and pointed at Leo's slicked back, greasy hair. In my loudest, clearest voice, I shouted, "Mummy, look, there's a mean man here." A huge fly resting on top of his head. This part was just too much. I couldn't keep it together while watching. The entire ballroom went dead silent. Everyone's eyes, like searchlights, locked onto the top of Leo's head, simultaneously. Leo froze completely. His face turned from white to red, at a visible speed, then from red to purple, and finally a bruised liver-coloured shade. Instinctively, he reached up to touch his head. Of course, there was nothing there, but it was too late. Someone in the crowd couldn't help but snort, letting out a laugh. That laugh was like a switch. Instantly, the entire room erupted into thunderous laughter. "Ha ha, a fly! Where does he come up with this stuff?" Look at Leo's face. I'm dying. Young Master Jang might be an idiot now, but he sure has a sharp tongue. Leo stood there, enduring the mockery coming from every direction. His face swelled with embarrassment, desperately, wishing a hole would open up in the floor to swallow him. Furious, he pointed at me. "You idiot! What kind of nonsense are you talking?" I ducked behind Sarafina, peeking my head out and looking at him with terror. I'm not talking nonsense. I really saw a huge, green one. It was even rubbing its hands together on your head. Ha ha. The laughter grew even louder. People were laughing so hard they couldn't stand straight, and others started pulling out their phones to record. Sarafina, standing in front of me, was stunned. She stared blankly at me. Then at the crowd, doubled over in laughter, her eyes full of disbelief. She probably didn't expect that an idiot like me could pull a move like that. I saw the corners of her tense mouth twitch slightly upward. Though she suppressed it quickly, I still caught her suppressing a giggle. Leo completely snapped, shamed into a rage. He raised his fist and tried to charge at me. "I'm going to kill you today, you retard." Sarafina's expression shifted. She immediately shielded me behind her. "Leo Miller, don't you dare touch him," she barked coldly. However, before Leo's fist could fall, security guards in black suits moved in from both sides, grabbing his arms and pinning him. The host of the gala, Mr. Sterling, walked over in person. He looked very displeased. "Mr. Miller, if you've had too much to drink, please leave. Events are not for troublemakers." Leo, being held by the guards, was still shouting indignantly. "Mr. Sterling, it was him. This idiot insulted me first." Mr. Sterling didn't even look at him. Instead, he offered me a kind smile. "Young Master Jiang, apologize for the fright. He's just an immature junior. Don't take it to heart." I shook my head, saying innocently, "I'm not angry. My teacher said, you shouldn't bother with flies." Ha ha. The crowd erupted again. In the end, Leo was dragged away by security like a dead dog, hauled right out of the ballroom. The farce was over. After the commotion died down, Sarafina took my hand and led me out onto the balcony. The evening breeze was cool, helping the blush on her face fade. She looked at me with complex eyes, hesitating to speak. She opened her mouth, but didn't know what to say. I tilted my head. "Miss, am I useless? Did I cause trouble for you again?" Sarafina was silent. She stared into my clear eyes for a long time. She suddenly reached out and gently straightened my slightly messy bow tie. Her fingers were cool. She accidentally brushed against my Adam's apple. I felt my throat tighten. Her movements paused as well. The atmosphere suddenly became charged. Quickly pulled her hand back, turning her face away, not daring to look at me. "No, you did well," she whispered, her voice very low, almost inaudible. "Thank you for today." I was stunned. In the 20 years I've known her, it was the first time I'd heard the word thank you from her mouth, and she said it to me. I looked at her ringed ears and her awkward profile. Somewhere in my heart, something felt like it had been gently nudged. "Miss," I called out to her. "Huh? You actually look really pretty when you smile." Sarafina's body stiffened instantly. She turned her head and looked at me in disbelief. I looked at her and gave her a wide, brilliant smile. No acting involved. It was completely from the heart. Sarafina stared at my smile, dazed. Bit by bit, her face turned red under the moonlight. Just then, a woman wearing a magnificent evening gown gracefully walked toward us, wine glass in hand. A polite but distant smile was fixed on her face. "Chase, long time no see." The smile on my face vanished instantly. Sarafina sensed the shift in the atmosphere as well. She frowned and looked at the newcomer. My useless uncle Arthur Jen appeared behind the woman. At some point, he looked at me with a smug, triumphant smile. "Chase, let me introduce you. This is Bianca White, the heirs to White Enterprises." He added emphasis, stating each word clearly, "and she is also your fiancé." The air seemed to freeze in that moment. The word fiancé was like a bomb, detonating on the quiet balcony. The colour drained from Sarafina's face instantly. She snapped her head toward me, her eyes full of shock, disbelief, and a trace of panic that even she hadn't realised was there. I didn't look at her. My gaze landed on Bianca White. Bianca was very beautiful. She was the quintessential perfect daughter of a wealthy family. Gentle, quiet, and elegant, she looked at me with a hint of curiosity and a perfectly calculated shyness. "Chase, we finally meet." Even her voice was lovely. Her voice was soft and gentle. Dear Uncle Arthur stood beside her, his face full of smug satisfaction. He had deliberately brought Bianca White right in front of Sarafina Liu, just to spite us and stake his claim. He looked at Sarafina. A fake smile plastered on his face as he said, "CEO Liu, I'm terribly sorry. Even if our Chase's mind isn't working quite right, his engagement is still very much in effect. If word got out that you're clinging to him like this, without any official status, it wouldn't exactly be good for either of our families' reputations." With those words, he was essentially calling Sarafina a home wrecker to her face, a gold digger trying to take advantage of the situation. Sarafina was shaking with rage, her lips turning pale. She couldn't say a single word in response because Arthur was stating the facts. Her current position was indeed awkward. She was a girlfriend with no official standing. In front of a legitimate fiancé, she looked ridiculous. Someone who didn't belong at the table, I saw her hand clenched into a tight fist, her knuckles turning white. She had spent her whole life as a proud woman. She had never endured such humiliation. Seeing her silence, Arthur grew even more arrogant. He took a step forward, reaching for my arm. "Chase, stop playing around. Come back with your uncle and Miss Bianca." Before his hand could even touch me, another hand moved even faster, tightly grabbing my wrist. It was Sarafina. I turned to look at her. Her face was pale. Her eyes were exceptionally determined. It was the look of a wild beast defending its territory when its prey is being threatened. She gripped me and pulled me slightly behind her. Then she looked Arthur and Bianca directly in the eye and said with absolute clarity, "Uncle Arthur, you can eat what you like, but you'd better mind your tongue. Chase and I are truly in love. We were together long before he lost his memory. As for some engagement, it was nothing more than a joke between elders. Chase himself never acknowledged it. Right now, he is my boyfriend, and no one is taking him away from me." Her voice wasn't loud, but every word carried immense weight. Everyone on the balcony was stunned. Arthur was stunned. Bianca was stunned. Even I was stunned. I looked at the woman shielding me. She wasn't particularly tall. In fact, she looked almost fragile from behind, but my heart felt as if it had been struck by something heavy. It felt tight and overwhelming. I had always assumed everything she did was just for the money, for that stock transfer agreement. Now, in front of everyone, for the sake of a simpleton like me, she was burning bridges with Arthur and Bianca. This brought no benefit to her or Lu Global. In fact, it would only invite retaliation from the Jiang family. What was she after? Was she after the trouble I caused her? Arthur's face turned a livid shade of grey. "Sarafina, don't push your luck. Who do you think you are? Spouting such nonsense here." Bianca also dropped her gentle act, her expression turning disdainful and arrogant. "Miss Liu, please understand your place. My marriage to Chase was personally settled by his father. Are you openly disrespecting the honour of our two families?" Sarafina let out a cold laugh, her aura fully unleashed. "Honour. Honour is something you earn for yourself, nothing given by others. If you want to take him from me, fine. Show me you have the actual capability to do it. Seeing that an argument was about to explode, I gently tugged on the hem of Sarafina's dress. She turned around, sharpness in her eyes instantly softening into concern. Don't be afraid, I've got you, she said. I looked at her, then shook my head. I stepped out from behind her and stood by her side, shoulder to shoulder. I looked at Arthur and Bianca across from us, keeping that look of pure innocence on my face. I pointed at Bianca and asked Sarafina, Miss, who is she? She looks so strange. Bianca's elegant face twisted in an instant. Who are you calling strange? I ducked back behind Sarafina and whispered. Her nose is so pointy, like a woodpecker's, and her chin is so sharp it looks like it could pierce the floor. It's practically touching the ground, and her eyes are so big they look like a cow's. Mommy said people who look like this are all bad guys. One of the onlookers couldn't help but burst out laughing. Bianca's face turned a bright shade of green. Everyone knew that her face was the result of a fortune spent on high-end plastic surgery abroad. Having it called worthless by a simpleton in front of all these people was more humiliating than a physical slap to the face. Arthur was trembling with rage. Chase, what are you saying? Apologize to Miss Bianca right now. I blinked my big innocent eyes. Should I apologize? I'm just telling the truth. Besides, I don't even know her. I turned around and tightly hugged Sarafina's arm, resting my head on her shoulder. In a clear display of possession, I announced loudly, I only know my Miss Sarafina. I like Miss Sarafina the most. You bad people. Don't bully my miss. After saying that, I even stuck my tongue out at Bianca. Bianca was shaking with fury, tears welling up in her eyes. She stomped her foot, crying as she ran away. Arthur gave me was full of disappointment and rage. He pointed at me, then at Sarafina, finally spitting out a threat. Fine, Sarafina, Chase, just you wait. With that, he stormed off. In a huff, the farce finally came to an end. Sarafina and I were left on the balcony. She was still standing there, dazed, seemingly unable to process what had just happened. I gave her arm a little shake. Miss, let's go home. I'm sleepy. Sarafina looked down at me, her eyes filled with complex emotions. Surprise, gratitude, and a hint of something I'd never seen before. Pure tenderness. She stared at me for a long time, then suddenly smiled. She reached out and ruffled my hair. Okay, let's go home. On the drive back, Sarafina stayed silent, focusing on the road. The atmosphere in the car was a bit subtle. As we neared the apartment, she suddenly spoke. Chase? Yeah. Were you doing that on purpose just now? My heart skipped a beat. She noticed. I turned to look at her immediately, putting on a look of total confusion. On purpose? Sarafina kept her eyes on the road, not looking at me. Nothing. She paused, then added, Stay away from that Bianca White from now on. She's not a good person, I nodded. I'll only stay with you, miss. The corners of Sarafina's mouth. It couldn't help but curl up again. Back at the penthouse, I finished my shower and, as usual, grabbed my pillow and wandered over to her bedroom door. She had just finished her shower too, wearing her conservative grey pyjamas, and was drying her hair. She froze when she saw me. Why are you here again? I tossed the pillow onto the floor and lay down as if I owned the place, pulling up the blanket. Miss Tous, tell me a story. Sarafina. She looked at me, acting as if this was perfectly normal, and looked a bit helpless. In the end, she didn't say anything. She turned off the hair dryer, walked to the bed, and picked up a book in a foreign language that I couldn't understand. Then, in her cool, lovely voice, she began to read me a bedtime story. I lay on my floor mat, listening to her voice. Looking at the flickering lights on the ceiling, my heart felt more peaceful than ever. Maybe staying an idiot like this forever wouldn't be so bad. The good times didn't last long, though. Arthur made his move, claiming my mental state was unstable and that I was unfit to perform my duties as a director. He joined forces with a few veteran shareholders to call an emergency board meeting. His goal was clear: to kick me out of my position as heir once and for all. When the news reached us, I was sitting on the living room rug, focused intently on building a Lego set. Sarafina was sitting beside me, managing documents while keeping an eye on me. Luke burst in looking frantic, his face a total mask of shock and disbelief. This is bad. This is really bad. Sarafina, sister-in-law. That old fox Arthur is calling a board meeting. Sarafina barely looked up, giving a flat Luke was practically jumping in anxiety. That's all you've got? This is a coup. If Chase gets removed, he'll really have nothing left, and your long-term meal ticket will be gone too. Sarafina shot him a glare, closed her laptop, and asked, What's the noise for? Time and place? Tomorrow morning at 10. Main conference room at headquarters. Understood. Sarafina stood up. Go take him to get changed right now. She pointed at me, still focused on my Legos. I looked up with a face full of confusion. Miss, where are we going? Sarafina walked over to me. Down and help me fix a piece of Lego I'd put in the wrong spot somewhere. Very fun. Her voice was calm without a hint of emotion, but I saw her hand holding the Lego, her fingertips turning slightly white. She was nervous. She was nervous. The next day, by Sarafina and Luke, I arrived at the Jang Enterprises headquarters. I was wearing a sharp black suit, my hair perfectly styled. I looked the part of a respectable businessman. Sarafina walked beside me, still maintaining her Ice Queen CEO aura. She was radiating power. Luke followed behind us like a loyal little assistant. The moment the three of us appeared, the entire lobby went silent. Every employee stopped what they were doing to stare at us, as if watching a drama unfold. I could hear them whispering. "Look, it's young Master Jang. He actually showed up. Is that CEO Lu with him? God, she really came with him. This is going to be good." On one side, the uncle trying to seize power. On the other, the badass CEO protecting her man. We ignored everyone's stares and walked straight into the elevator. The conference room was already packed. Arthur sat at the head of the table, looking triumphant. Beside him sat Bianca White, dressed impeccably, looking at the directors as if she were already the lady of the house. The moment we pushed the door open, the entire room went dead quiet. Every eye in the room landed on us. Arthur wasn't surprised at all to see us. In fact, he gave me a look that said, "So, you finally showed up? Ah, CEO Lu is here as well. What a rare guest. However, this is a private John family matter. As an outsider, CEO Lu, it's probably not appropriate for you to be here." Before Sarafina could speak, took a step forward and slammed a document onto the table. "Who says CEO Luwu is an outsider? She currently holds 5% of Chase Jang shares, making her a legal shareholder of Jang Enterprises. Why shouldn't she be here?" Arthur froze. He picked up the document and looked at it, his expression shifting instantly. It was a stock gift agreement I'd given to Sarafina for a joint project before I lost my memory. I'd almost forgotten about it myself. I didn't expect her to use it as her ticket in. I looked at Sarafina. She happened to look over and winked at me, a trace of smugness in her eyes. It warmed my heart. Arthur quickly regained his composure. He let out a cold laugh. "Fine, very well, since CEO Lu is also a shareholder. Take a seat. It's just as well that you see exactly what kind of state this man you've chosen is in." Sarafina led me to a seat at the end of a long table. The meeting began. Arthur stood up, cleared his throat, and began his performance. He started with a pained expression, recounting the glorious history of Jang Enterprises. Then he shifted gears, subtly hinting at my parents' poor leadership. Finally, he pointed the finger at me. "Directors, as you can all see, my nephew Chase Jang has been mentally unstable ever since the accident. Not only does he not recognize anyone, but his behavior is no different from that of a 3-year-old at the gala a few days ago. He publicly insulted the heiress of White Enterprises, causing severe damage to our company's reputation. I ask you, can a person like this lead Jang Enterprises into the future? If we leave the company in his hands, how can we answer to our shareholders? How can we answer to our thousands of employees?" His speech was passionate, full of dramatic pauses, and highly manipulative. Few veteran shareholders, who were in his pocket, immediately began to chime in. "Chairman Arthur is right. In his current state, Chase is not fit to be the heir. For the sake of the company's future, we must strip him of his inheritance rights. Propose that the more capable Mr. Arthur Jang take over as acting chairman." Bianca White, sitting nearby, put on a timed expression of concern and helplessness, adding weight to Arthur's performance. They had completely seized control of the room's atmosphere. Everyone was looking at me, their gazes full of pity, contempt, or malicious glee. It was as if I were a piece of meat on a chopping block, waiting to be carved up. I kept my head down the whole time like a child who'd done something wrong. Fidgeting with my fingers, Serafina sat beside me, silent, her face frozen and cold. Under the table, she was holding my hand tightly. Her palm was covered in sweat. Seeing that the time was ripe, Arthur flashed a triumphant smile. "Since everyone is in agreement, let's put it to a vote. All those in favour of stripping Chase Jang of his inheritance and appointing me as the new chairman, please raise your hands." As soon as the words left his mouth, he was the first to raise his hand. The veteran shareholders around him immediately followed suit. 1 vote, 2 votes, 3 votes, more and more hands went up. The tide had completely turned. The smirk on Arthur's face grew wider. He looked toward us, his eyes full of provocation and smugness. Sarafina's face was as white as a sheet of paper. The grip on my hand grew tighter and tighter, just as Arthur was about to announce the voting results. I, who had been hanging my head, suddenly looked up. I looked at Arthur at the head of the table. That innocent, bewildered expression on my face began to vanish bit by bit. It was replaced by a cold, sharp gaze that looked at him as if he were a dead man. I slowly curled the corners of my mouth. "Uncle, you've been acting for so long. Beige, aren't you tired?" My voice wasn't loud. It reached every corner of the conference room with perfect clarity. The entire room fell into a dead silence. It was as if someone had hit the pause button. Everyone stared at me, dumbfounded. The smile on Arthur's face froze. The smug look on Bianca's face turned to stone as well. Serafina's head snapped around toward me. She stared at me in pure disbelief, her pupils constricting violently. I met her shocked gaze and gave her a reassuring smile. Then I stood up. My movements weren't fast. Each one seemed to thud in sync with the room's heartbeat. I straightened my blazer's collar, my gaze sweeping across the room before finally locking onto Arthur's face, which had already begun to turn pale. "The game is over," I said. You could have heard a pin drop in the conference room. Everyone looked like they'd been hit with a paralysis spell, staring at me with their jaws on the floor. Arthur's mouth hung open in an O shape, his expression shifting from shock to confusion and finally to terror. Your amnesia." I let out a scoff and pulled back my chair, sauntering over to the head of the long table. I looked down at him, my gaze icy. "What about it? Did you really think I was as stupid as you?" With a mental boom, like something exploded in Arthur's brain. He finally realized what was happening. The amnesia was fake. Everything was a lie. He had been played from the very beginning. He pointed at me, his finger shaking, as if he had Parkinson's. You faked an illness to trick me." "The feeling is mutual," I said flatly. "Weren't you the one hoping I'd have an accident just so you could seize the company?" A single sentence for me choked out all his excuses. Veteran shareholders who had been so loud and passionate about stripping me of my rights a moment ago, now all hungs, not daring to make a sound. Bianca White's face was deathly pale as she instinctively shrank back in her seat. In the entire room, only Luke, as the initial shock wore off, broke into a look of I knew it, ecstasy. He slapped his thigh in excitement, nearly jumping out of his chair. "Holy. Amazing. Chase, you're the man." As for Serafina, she just sat there silently watching me. Her gaze was complex. Of shock, realization and fury, but there was also a trace of something even she hadn't noticed. Sheer relief. I ignored the murmurs. I walked behind the chairman's chair, leaning my hands on the backrest, and leaning forward to look Arthur directly in the eye. "Uncle, you said earlier that I was acting like a 3-year-old. I smiled, my voice low but heavy with pressure. "That's because against a low-level player like you, the IQ of a 3-year-old is more than enough." Arthur was so enraged he couldn't catch his breath, looking like he might drop dead on the spot. "I didn't give him a chance to recover," I continued. "You also said I publicly insulted Miss Bianca White, causing severe damage to the company." I turned my head toward the pale-faced Bianca. "Miss White, did you say my comments about your plastic surgery were more damaging? Or would it be worse if I leaked those photos from back when you were trying to break into Hollywood and spent the night drinking with that certain director? Which one would hurt your reputation more?" Bianca's pupils contracted sharply. She stared at me, her eyes filled with terror. How? How do you know about that?" I smiled. "If you don't want people to know, don't do it in the first place. Did you really think your past was perfectly buried?" Bianca's whole body began to tremble. I stopped looking at her and turned my gaze back to Arthur. "Uncle, regarding the way you and these directors misappropriated company funds to start that shell company overseas, specifically for money laundering, do you need me to bring out the evidence right now to give everyone a little show and tell?" This time it wasn't just Arthur, the veteran shareholders sitting around him. All underwent a sudden, drastic change in expression. They looked at me in horror, as if they were seeing a ghost. Arthur completely lost it. He knew he was finished. I actually held every single one of his cards. He slumped into his chair like a pile of mud, his face the colour of ash. I stood up straight and scanned the room. Every director who met my gaze instinctively lowered their head. The entire conference room was silent. I pulled out the chairman's chair and sat down. I crossed my legs and laced my fingers on the table. "Does anyone else want to strip me of my inheritance?" No one spoke. "Did anyone still want to nominate my uncle for chairman?" Still, no one spoke. The conference room was terrifyingly quiet. I nodded with satisfaction. Good. I picked up a folder from the table and tossed it in front of Arthur. "Here are your resignation papers and a stock transfer. Agreement. Sign them and then get out. Out of respect for your age, I won't call the police, but from now on, I don't ever want to see you again." With a trembling hand, Arthur picked up the pen. He glanced one last time at the old shareholders who had betrayed me with him, his eyes full of despair. Finally, with a sense of resignation, he signed his name on the documents. The coup that had been meticulously planned for so long ended in this theatrical anticlimactic fashion. Arthur and his cronies were wiped out completely. Bianca White skewered away like a frightened mouse. Only a few neutral directors remained in the room along with Luke, Rafina, and me. Those directors looked at me, their eyes filled with awe. They probably never imagined that this legendary playboy who only knew how to party could have such a ruthless streak and such deep calculating schemes. I waved my hand and dismissed them. The three of us were left in the massive conference room. Luke rushed over and gave me a massive bear hug. Chase, that was badass. I knew you wouldn't go down that easily. I pushed him off in disgust. All right, cut the mushy stuff. Go find the PR manager. Tell them to get ready for a press conference. Got it, Luke replied and ran out, eager to get to work. Now only I remained in the conference room with Sarafina. The atmosphere suddenly became awkward. I looked at her and she looked at me. Our eyes met. The gaze was still very complex. I cleared my throat and spoke first. Thank you for earlier. Sarafina arched an eyebrow, her tone laced with a hint of sarcasm. Thank me for what? Thank me for being a complete idiot and letting you play me for a fool. I rubbed my nose, feeling a bit guilty. I didn't mean to keep tricking you. You didn't mean it. Her voice rose several decib. Mr. Jiang, your acting was superb. You fooled me and everyone else. How did it feel watching me get into fights for you, serving you hand and foot? Did it give you a real sense of accomplishment? I could hear the fury in her voice. I knew she was mad, and why wouldn't she be? Anyone would be after being messed with like that, especially someone as proud as she is. I walked over to her, looked into her eyes and said, seriously, Sarafina, I admit at first I really was just enjoying the show. But later, I paused. Later, when I saw you burn bridges with Arthur and the others, just to protect me, when I saw you stand in front of me and say that no one was taking me away, I admit my heart skipped a beat. Sarafina's body stiffened instantly. She stared at me in disbelief, as if she were hearing a total fairy tale. I looked at her and continued, so now I am officially and seriously asking you to go out with me. Miss Sarafina Liu, would you like to be my real girlfriend? I watched her. I waited for her answer. But Sarafina's next reaction was completely beyond my expectations. After a brief moment of shock, she suddenly burst out laughing. She was practically shaking with laughter, her voice full of mockery. She looked at me as if she were looking at a naive idiot. Chase, do you really think you've won? I froze. What do you mean? Sarafina slowly stood up. She walked over to me and tapped her index finger gently against my chest. Her face was a playful cat and mouse smirk. Did you really think you were the only one acting? She leaned close to my ear, and in a voice only the two of us could hear, she whispered softly, actually, I've known you were faking it for a long time. My brain short-circuited for 3 seconds. I stared at that familiar, smug, punchable smile on Sarafina's face. It was the exact same smile I'd worn whenever I watched her make a fool of herself while I played dumb. You? What did you say? Sarafina took a step back, crossed her arms, and looked at me with smug amusement. I said, I've known you were faking it for a long time, probably since the moment you folded that stock agreement into a paper airplane and threw it into the fountain. That's when I started to suspect a real simpleton wouldn't have such precision in their destructiveness. He might have eaten the document or used it to wipe his nose, but he definitely wouldn't have destroyed it in such a deliberately provocative way. And at the gala, even though you acted innocent, every single insult you threw at Leo Miller hit him exactly where it hurt. That's not being an idiot, that's being a devious jerk, and most importantly, 1020 Desta. Sarafina paused, the corners of her mouth curling up even higher. Chase, you forgot that we grew up together. You have a specific habit when you sleep. What habit? I asked instinctively. You grind your teeth. I heard it the very first night we lived together. The sound was exactly the same as when you were a kid. Fell asleep on my family sofa. My face instantly turned a deep, embarrassed crimson. I felt like she'd stripped me completely bare. So all this time, while I thought I was playing her like a fiddle, while I thought I was getting the upper hand, she was actually just sitting back and watching my performance. She was playing me like a fool. An indescribable sense of shame and fury surged into my heart. Sarafina Liu, I growled, looking at her through gritted teeth. She laughed even harder. Well, young Master Jiang, does it feel to be the one kept in the dark like an idiot? Is it fun? Looking at her smug face. I was about to explode on the spot. I took a deep breath, telling myself to stay calm. I couldn't get angry. If I got angry, I'd lose. I looked at her again. Is my mind racing at 100 meters an hour, right? If she'd known all along, then why did she keep the act going? Why did she stand up for me? When Arthur and Bianca were making things difficult, why did she go out of her way to protect me? Even burning bridges with them, it made no sense, unless a bold thought flashed through my mind. I looked at her and suddenly grinned. Sarafina, don't get too ahead of yourself. She arched an eyebrow. Even if you knew all along, so what? I took a step toward her, closing the distance. Are you brave enough to say you don't feel anything for me at all? Serafina's smile faltered. I kept moving in until she was backed against the conference table with nowhere to run. I lowered my head, staring at her slightly flushed cheeks and her somewhat panicked gaze. If you didn't have feelings for me, why did you shield me at the gala? If you didn't have feelings for me, why were you holding my hand so tightly and nervously at the board meeting? If you didn't have feelings for me, then last night, did you blush just because I said you look pretty when you smile? With every sentence I spoke, her face shifted from pale back to pink. By the end, she was speechless, able only to glare at me with those beautiful eyes. She was acting tough. She was soft on the inside. I got it. I understood everything. This woman said no with her mouth, but her body was being honest. She'd already fallen for me. It was just that she had been using the "I'm doing it for the money" excuse to lie to herself. The grin on my face grew wider. Serafina, you lose. I lowered my head, slowly, bringing my lips toward hers. Her eyes went wide. Her breathing became rapid, but she didn't push me away. Just as our lips were about to touch, the conference room door slammed open with a bang. Luke's big face poked in excitedly. Chase, the press conference is all set. His voice came to a screeching halt. He saw the two of us inches apart, locked in an intimate embrace. He turned into a stone statue once again. His mouth dropped open into another O shape. Serafina acted like a cat whose tail had been stepped on. She shoved me away, her face so red it looked like it was bleeding. He scrambled to straighten her clothes. Then she shot me a murderous glare, followed by one for Luke. Without saying a single word, she turned on her heels and fled the scene. She looked like a soldier in a desperate retreat. Luke looked at me, then at Serafina's retreating back, looking totally confused. Did I come at a bad time? I watched Serafina leave, the smile on my face impossible to suppress. I turned and patted Luke on the shoulder. No, you came at the perfect time. 3 months later, Jang Enterprises and Lu Global held a joint press conference to announce the biggest corporate marriage of the year. Serafina Lu and I were officially engaged. The conference room was filled with a sea of camera flashes. I was wearing a crisp tailored suit, holding the hand of Serafina, who was stunning in a white dress. As we accepted the congratulations of the media, Serafina wore a standard, flawless corporate smile, but while standing beside me, she whispered through gritted teeth, "Chase Jang, don't get too smug. I'm telling you, this is strictly a business partnership. If you want me to actually love you, try again in the next life." I looked at her and smiled. I leaned close to her ear, and in a voice only the two of us could hear, I whispered, "Oh, really? Then why were you hugging my arm last night, muttering my name in your sleep?" Serafina's body stiffened instantly. Face turned red at a visible speed. She gave my waist a vicious pinch. I winced in pain, but the smile on my face only grew more brilliant. A reporter asked, "Mr. Jung, CCO Lu, may I ask who pursued whom first?" I picked up the microphone, glanced at my fiancée, whose face was as red as an apple, and said affectionately it was her. Of course. She fell in love with me at first sight and wouldn't leave me alone. She even faked being my girlfriend just to get close to me, trying to scam me out of my money and my virtue. Tried to refuse at first, but I didn't have a choice. She just offered too much to say no. The room erupted in laughter. I saw Serafina under the table already slipping her high heel off. I knew that when we got home, I would be facing a bout of absolutely brutal domestic violence, but I was more than willing to take it. After all, hadn't I been planning this for a long time too? Either end.